Welcome to WeMentor Mondays with Nancy podcast. Get inspired. Break through to new dimensions with your entrepreneurial peers on the journey of self-leadership mastery and life success. Reinvent or evolve yourself as you redesign your business. Dual innovation. Take charge of who you next become. Feel more deeply to think, act, lead, and mentor more clearly and more effectively. Learn something new from our conversation today.
Nancy, I think you do great work, and I think that you also should never stop doing what you're doing and keep pushing forward and mentoring people.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to WeMentor Mondays. I'm Nancy. Today is the next part of our series, Life in Times of COVID-19. Now, Sally Doyle is today's podcast sponsor. You can schedule a profit analysis with Sally for only $149. She has the same philosophy as today's guest, Joel Salaman. Feel free to call her to take charge of your money life. Get a second opinion. Sally's the founder of Absolute Business Solutions. She's known as a trustworthy bookkeeper who loves crunching the numbers for small business owners and entrepreneurs and sorting out all this COVID-19 paperwork for people to get payroll processing plans and, other government funds so that you can sleep more soundly if that's possible right now during these times. Knowing that every dollar in your business is 100% accounted for, and you're freed up to do the work that you're good at and keep evolving in your leadership. So Sally Doyle, profit strategist, bookkeeper, and innovative thinker at Absolute Business Solutions. You can reach her at 1-651-208-8151, or just scroll down from the podcast notes and you will see her website that you can click on very easily. On to today's guest. Joel Salaman is a prosperity coach who helps others overcome obstacles standing in the way of their financial freedom. In 2019, Joel published The 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use, Only the Unconventional Ones, which was a bestseller in both self-help and personal finance. In 2018, he published Mindful Money Management, Memoirs of a Hedge Fund Manager. You guessed it. He was a hedge fund manager. We'll see what he's up to now. Joel is an award-winning speaker and frequent podcast guest. He has led 11 workshops teaching the concepts of how to become or overcome limiting beliefs. He's spoken at numerous Rotary and Lions clubs in the New York metropolitan area and at Mercy College's MBA program, as well as many of you might know Mike Dooley, the Infinite Possibilities Training Conference. Mike Dooley is an author and has he coined the phrase, Joel, for infinite possibilities?
He has, Nancy, and he also says thoughts become things.
Yes, very, very powerful training. I recently saw him at the Mall of America with his Irish guest. It was just a really powerful day, and we spent it there. Julianne Siegel connected me, and we were volunteers at the workshop, and she was the one who connected you and I. So,
that's right.
Yeah. She's got that Infinite Possibilities training, but you have actually been Julianne's coach. Is that right?
Yes, and so thank you, Nancy, for so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be on, and yeah, so I was certified by Mike Dooley 3 years ago and spoke at his conference in 2018, and that's where I met Julianne, and I was part of the team that trained her. So yeah, it was a great experience. Highly recommend getting connected with Mike and the Notes from the Universe.
Yeah, Notes from the Universe. Many of us get those daily inspirations that, all of a sudden they just fit with, how our life is or how our day is shaping. He's a phenomenal writer. But back to you. In 2012, you achieved a decades-long dream with the launch of your own hedge fund, Salamar Capital. It's named after your 2 daughters, Lauren and Morgan. I think that's what I love about business ownership. You create things, right? You can put meaning behind your own business name. You can develop your own logo. You can shape the work that you're doing in very, very unique ways to really help other people.
Absolutely. And I tell people, I named my company after my daughters because they taught me what unconditional love was all about.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, kids can do that for us if we're open to it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, especially if we haven't received it in our own families. Your financial experience includes managing a $700 million long/short equity and credit portfolio for Citi. So you generated positive returns every year during your time at Citi, including 2008, when the markets plummeted to 40% and even some of them 50% of the stocks collapsed. The funds that you were managing in your stock portfolio, you had mentioned that they increased by a few percentages during that time?
Correct. Yeah, I actually managed to make money in 2008, which my former colleagues of mine tell me is my claim to fame for managing money.
Wow. Yeah, that's really incredible. Because as a hedge fund, you hedge your bets on certain funds. And how do you go about, coming up with the portfolios or the stocks that you put in your financial portfolios?
Yeah, so what I teach now, how I coach people is in my latest book, as you mentioned, The 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use, I have a very simple 5-step stock screen. So what I teach is called fundamental analysis. So you look at the company, you look how much money they make, you look at how much sales they produce. And so that's what I did in a very more complicated manner than I have in my book. And we come up with companies that we think are significantly undervalued. So the stock price is, say, 20 and we think it's worth 40, so you buy it. And then there are other companies that we do our analysis and we say it's worth $20 and the stock is currently at 40, so we bet that it's going to go down, which is also called shorting. So long and short, you're kind of, if the market goes down a lot, you're hedged and you should still be able to make some money or lose less. And then if the market goes up a lot, you can still make money.
Yeah. And within the portfolio or how you work with people and doing the fundamental analysis, how much time do you spend on looking at the leadership team?
That's a great question. So it's in the very simple 5 steps, a lot of information is embedded in step 5, which is how did the stock do when the company reports their earnings? So the very simple 5 steps doesn't go into any specifics on the management team or how much stock they own or, their past history. It's a very simple screen to get to, okay, is this a company that I might want to invest in? And then, of course, you can do a lot more detailed analysis, including looking at the management team.
Okay. Did you read the book Good to Great by Jim Collins?
Yes.
And
Classic.
yeah. And he talked about that he was writing a book about why more companies aren't great because we end up being kind of at the status quo of good and we say good enough. And one of the results of all of his research on these, because as he had his teams of younger people studying the different stock, he divided up the different companies, and then he narrowed in on companies that were, had a trajectory that was very consistent over a longer period of time, like 10 years of consistent growth. And one of the surprise findings in all the research that he did was he found that he didn't think his book was about leadership, but it turned out to be about leadership.
Absolutely. I've found, as a professional investor that meeting, when you're a professional investor, you get a lot more information than the average individual investor. And I found when I was a professional investor, meeting the company and asking them the difficult questions and seeing how the management team, the chief executive officer, the chief financial officer, the chief investment officer of the company answers those questions can give you a better sense as to the long-term viability of the company and the likelihood that you can make a lot of money in the investment. And this is actually rule number 2 in the 9 money rules millionaires use, which is trust your intuition. And I'm pretty sure no financial advisor, no financial planner is going to tell you to trust your intuition. But I will tell you, managing $700 million at the peak, that if I didn't trust my intuition, I either made less money or I lost money. And so I teach my clients now how to develop their intuition. Right? You can do exercises. You're making decisions all day long. You can start with simple decisions like, okay, like on Thursday mornings, I take my daughters to, I used to take my daughters to school, and we had options. We could take the highway, we could take the local roads. And so I used to just trust my intuition. What does my intuition say this morning? And generally it would tell me to take the highway. But there was one particular morning when the traffic was all backed up. And my intuition was still screaming at me to take the highway. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So I trust my intellect, right? I reason it out and I say, no, I'm going to go local. And immediately my stomach's in knots because I see the flashing lights, I hear the sirens, and I get pulled over. And it cost me a $150 speeding ticket because I didn't trust my intuition. And to this day, my daughters tease me and they call me Speedy Pants.
I think my daughter could say that to me too, about Speedy Pants. On the freeway, I'm kind of a lead foot. So what I would like to do is have 2 conversations with you and kind of build out a little bit more of your background, because when you're in the financial industry, it's really hard to find a trustworthy investor like, in doing the research. And I ran a investment club for 10 years. And one of the criteria was it needed to be business owners that I had worked with at least 3 years and that wanted to be together for about, a minimum of 3 years of investing, several thousands of dollars per month. And we had 10 people in the group. And the goal was I wanted to understand finances better and investing better. And so we picked a stockbroker, and then every month we would, invest in companies, and realized in a short period of time that really you need to kind of do the research thoroughly and buy and hold. At the end, so we closed right before 2008. And I just had a feeling like, I can't do this anymore. The direction that our world was going, it was disconcerting to me. And I just was feeling like it's time to do something else. And so we closed out the funds. There were just 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 4 of us left in the end. We made money, but not as much as you would think, because nobody did the amount of homework that they needed to make these big decisions about these stocks, because we were too busy growing our businesses. And we were really dependent upon our stockbroker to bring in research, which he did every month. He was fantastic about that. What do you say about all those groups out there? Just what is your initial reaction to what my experience has been?
So rule number 8 is, can you really do it yourself? DIY investing. And it's a rhetorical question, obviously. I teach. I'm not a stockbroker. I'm not a financial planner, financial advisor. All I do is teach. And so I teach people that they can do it themselves. So I absolutely agree with investment clubs and individuals investing on their own. But you're right, Nancy. You have to do some research, right? You have to at least go through and check the 5 steps in the 5-step stock screen.
Like, if I ever did that again, I would probably work with somebody like you who's there to teach. So there's no financial attachment, although it is an incentive for people to, give you good stock ideas because of the research that they've done and they want to make money. And so they're invested in helping other people make money. But there's a lot of variables around that. And they all have different expertise in certain areas. And So I think working with a teacher like you would help a club to set up the club with some really good rules about what to research, how to research, and set up a really good foundation with your 9 principles to really focus in on setting it up right from the start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you have to have the foundation. And as we talked about before this call, my 9 money rules millionaires use, most of the rules are what I would call non-process rules. I mentioned intuition, I mentioned DIY, but most of the rules are related to, I would call them spiritual rules. Rule number 1 is when you believe. And so, having, most people won't talk about this rule at all, but you have to have some faith in your investment, right? If you don't do no research, you get a tip from a buddy of yours, then if the stock starts going against you, you may be selling when you should be buying, or buying when you should be selling, because your level of belief is so low that you have so much doubt. I say hashtag doubt the doubt, but you have to have done some research to start. And if you're just going off of a tip from buddy, well, what do you do when the stock's down? Do you call him or her up all the time and say, okay, what are you doing now? Is your buddy selling? You got to be in constant contact, or you're making probably decisions based on limited information. So my view is the very first and most important step is to have your belief level. And I tell my clients to write down their level of belief level from 1 to 10, where 10 is absolute faith and knowing that you're going to make money, and 1 is there's no way I'm ever going to make money in this investment. And if you're not at least a 7, 8, 9, or 10, don't go there, because you're gonna be selling when you should be buying, or buying when you should be selling.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, in this conversation, we're getting to know you. You're pulling in some of the rules of the 9 rules that millionaires use, the unconventional ones. So you'll be pulling in some of the pieces of that during our conversation. I'd like to focus in on a little bit of your background so we can get to know you a little bit better and build out the second conversation around the 9 money rules that millionaires use, the unconventional ones. Where did you grow up, and what was it like growing up in your family?
Oh, great question, Nancy. So I grew up, I tell people I lived in the state of New York my whole life, except for about 15 months when I lived in Switzerland. I was working for a Swiss company, which actually that was the time in my life. Got to be able to travel to 30 countries during that time. But I grew up on Long Island, in Massapequa, and Long Island in the state of New York. And I recently did a webinar with a woman who's a couples coach, and we were talking about the money memories that couples have. When you get together, do you talk about your money memories? What's your first money memory? And we talked about that. But I grew up in what I'd consider a middle class or upper middle class household, and yet the conversations around money were all about scarcity and lack. And there was this big poverty consciousness where, we were taught growing up, my sister and I, that we can't afford that. That's too expensive. Money doesn't grow on trees. I got literally screamed at for leaving the house and leaving the light on in my room. Got screamed at. We're not a shareholder of Long Island Lighting Company. Turn that light off. So that whole mentality of there's not enough. And what I teach my clients is there's plenty. Having an abundance mindset serves you so much better. And, think about all types of abundance, not just money. There's abundance of air. There's abundance of sun. There's abundance of, when you go to the beach, the amount of sand. If you can, and I give the analogy of going to the ocean. People go to the ocean with thimbles instead of buckets or barrels, or the analogy to money. People ask for so little, They don't realize that there's literally $450 trillion of net worth around the globe. So you divide that by the 7.5 billion people, and there's literally more than $5 million on average per person on this earth. So there's huge amounts of abundance available, and but but that's not what we learned growing up. I think most people I talk to, at least the clients and the potential clients I've talked to, they grew up with the same kind of mentality that there's not enough. Another limiting belief is you have to work hard. You have to work really, really hard to become rich and successful. And that's from my perspective a very limiting belief from my life and from many others that I know who became very rich doing what they love and having a fun time and enjoying. So that's a little bit about how I grew up.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. If you think of 3 to 5 words that would describe your mother, who else was in your family? Are you an only child?
No, I had a sister. Have a sister who's 4 years older, and my parents are literally still married after. Let's see. Let me calculate. 63 years.
Wow. So they're still alive?
They're still alive and still married.
Still married. And what have they learned from you about abundance and having that kind of mindset? Do they agree with you or?
No.
Okay.
It's we don't. We have different points of view. I teach my clients this, but they have different points of view on money and my father especially is a child of the Great Depression, so that kind of mentality was instilled in him, and that's how he lives his life.
Okay. So if you think in terms of your mother, what would be an example of some words that would describe her?
Oh, caring, thoughtful, protective, fun-loving, adventurous.
Okay. And your dad?
Kind, thoughtful, really cares about other people, considerate.
Sounds like you had some really nice basic foundations of love in your family. Yeah. Mm. Did they grow up in New York too?
Yes, Brooklyn and Long Island.
And what was their line of work?
So my dad was an optometrist up until 18 months ago.
Oh, wow.
He worked until he was 86.
Wow.
And my mom was a teacher, a reading teacher.
Okay. So a kind of an educational and specialized home. Okay. Did she teach you how to read?
No, it was school. Well, I guess I guess so. I mean, my grandparents and her. Yeah.
Okay. All right. When you think of prosperity, and it's definitely built on the principle of spirituality. So the development of the soul outside of religious traditions.
Correct.
So how did you experience spirituality and religion in your home growing up?
So I guess for me, I became much more spiritual in the last. I became spiritual in the last, call it 12 years after my divorce. It was a pretty traumatic divorce, and so I went through a lot of reading and found a lot of spiritual books that really resonated with me. And, finding Mike Dooley 4 years ago was also helped me on my spiritual path. So, yeah, I was brought up Jewish, but I consider myself spiritual.
Okay.
And so, all about, as Mike teaches, thoughts become things. You create your life. Taking full responsibility for all aspects of my life is something that's helped me, in the last 12, 13 years to, it's what I teach others. I infuse a lot of the concepts of infinite possibilities into my teachings with my clients. And so that's why, beliefs and intuition and being happy and being grateful and giving are some of the key rules in my book.
Very nice. I don't want to go, I could go down a rabbit hole at this point with that, but I'm not going to. So, because I think that there's, what I'm thinking about is your father is an optometrist and just recently retired. Did he have his own private practice?
Yes. Yeah. He and his father so my grandfather was an optometrist. And so he joined the practice when he, completed his studies. And then, when my grandfather passed away, he just took over the practice. So
was there any expectation for you to be a optometrist?
It's a great question. And I didn't feel that at all. And I didn't have any interest. And so it was nice that I didn't feel any pressure to do it. And we never had the conversation like, do you want to do this? It was, what do you want to do?
Oh,
as
I
opposed
see.
to,
do you
want to become an optometrist? So, I didn't even give it a thought. It was not my interest. And so I started my career as an actuary. I don't know if so I basically, an actuary is somebody who works at an insurance company or at a consulting company, but calculating the premiums you have to pay for your life insurance or health insurance or car insurance or home insurance. So,
and they're based on statistics, right, of life expectancy and
exactly, and probabilities of accident or probability of fire, those kinds of things. So it's a lot of math. I majored in math and statistics, but as working as an actuary first years after graduating and studying for all those exams and becoming a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, and then realizing that this was not what I wanted to do with my life. And so it took me a long time. It took me 15 years, but my dream back in 1993 was to become an investor. And I had no MBA. I had no higher degree. I just had passion and interest. And one actuary told me what he did to get to the sell side, which is like people who pitch stocks to investors. So he was one step away. And that's what most people do is they go to like an investment bank and they're a professional stock picker for, large mutual funds. And then after they do that, then they go to the mutual funds or they go to the hedge fund and become a professional investor. So he gave me the path that he took to get to there. And I didn't actually ever go to investment bank. I went right to becoming an investor. But I had this dream, and so I just pursued it. And I teach my clients now to have faith in their dreams and desires rather than having faith in the doubt so doubt the doubt. Because I had a lot of doubt because everyone I talked to in the 90s about doing this, they said to me, Joel, you have the best job in the world. First of all, the actuary was literally on the cover of Forbes magazine as the #1 job in the United States. Low stress, high pay. And so why would you ever want to quit that? And I said, I don't enjoy it. And, rule number 3 in the 9 money rules is be happy. And I really wanted to be happy by doing something I loved. And so it took me 15 years. I had a lot of doubt. Everyone I talked to said, don't do it. But I got there and I achieved my dream.
Wow, that's so exciting. All right. Well, we're going to kind of close out this part of our conversation. It's a nice segue into our next conversation. And what's happening in New York with the violence that started in Minnesota with the murder by a police officer and 3 accomplices on Memorial Day and George Floyd. And violence has ensued, and not just in Minneapolis, but all over the country. There's like over 120 cities who were reacting and responding to the horrific way in which this George died, and how it's all connected with institutional racism against African Americans and not respecting people's individual humanity. What's happening in New York as a result of all this?
I hear the question, Nancy, and what I like to do is focus on the positive and focus on what I think will positively come out of this. And I talk a lot about this in my book, which is Choosing Faith Over Fear. And I'm a very faithful person, not religious-wise, but I have faith in others. I have faith in humanity. I have faith that everything's going to work out. And so I actually talked about this in my book because I came from a place where I didn't have that. I grew up, my house was robbed twice. So we were robbed on July 4th, 1982. And a few years earlier, I was actually walked in on, I used to go home for lunch in high school. It was right around the corner from my house. And I walked home and I walked into the open front door to see two robbers ransacking my house. I was 14 years old. And so that had a pretty traumatic, lasting experience on me. And a couple of things happened growing up, which made me not trust my fellow human beings. And so for many years, I had this lack of trust. And I guess it was after my divorce that I realized that this was not serving me. And it was actually creating the actual thing that I didn't want to happen, which was having more and more people come into my life that I couldn't trust. A lot more people come into my life that weren't helpful to me or mean to me. And so I started changing my thoughts. Okay, people are kind. There's plenty of people out there supporting me. And so I go through this in my book, and I've actually, over the last 10 years, have had so many supportive, helpful, friendly joint ventures, just friends come out of nowhere. People support me in the most unusual times. And so you can create a life where you have a very supportive, loving environment where people are loving to you and supportive of you by putting that love out into the world.
Absolutely.
So
that's good advice.
Is that we can do that, and the people who do from bad things. I quote this in my first book, Mindful Money Management. From bad things come good things, and from really terrible things come amazing, awesome things. And so I truly believe that when things look most dire, that's when awesome, great change is coming. And so we should be celebrating, because at the end of the day, everyone, I truly believe, has some goodness in them. And so if we focus on that, if you can focus on the goodness in every soul out there, then you'll get that back.
That's great. Excellent. Through this series, I'm just starting the last few minutes of our conversation. Would you like to join me in just a 3-minute meditation? I know that's part of what you encourage in Infinite Possibilities. Doing a mind shift, right? Of realizing that thoughts have a lot of power.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you shifted your thinking, and that changed your perspective, which also then was like a magnet for bringing positive energy type people into your sphere. And you've been creating wealth together. And so it always starts with ourselves. And I think that that's the message during this time that you're reinforcing is, let's take a moment just to get comfortable in a chair. Just get your feet comfortably planted on the floor, squeeze your toes and then release them. Push down on your feet just a little bit so that you can kind of engage your whole leg. We've been sitting for a while, and our listeners have been listening for a while. And so they may be, walking and listening or, moving or standing and doing other things. But right now, we're just going to shift for a 3-minute meditation and sit down and press our feet against the floor and feel the energy underneath the floor and that the floor is supporting us, and sitting with our legs on, relaxing our legs, squeeze our thigh bones and relax those, and then put our hands on our lap. And then slowly just notice that from your tailbone up through the crown of your head, that it's like a light string that's pulling you up. So you're sitting in your tallest space right now. And then let's gently take a breath in and feel the length of the breath and just hold it a second and then exhale. This is something you can always come back to. We can control our breath. Take an inhale in when we feel a lot of emotions. Hold it for a second and then exhale out. So inhale in and release all the thoughts and just let them kind of float by as you focus in on your breathing. So as you inhale, you can feel your chest expand and the rest of your body, and you can feel your Buddha belly push out. And then as you exhale, it slowly pulls back in. And so one of the things that is very helpful while you're continuing to breathe is to just notice those subtle little things about yourself that we take for granted, like our breath, when we're going about our day. And check in with your body and notice if you're feeling a little discomfort or if there's bigger emotions coming up, that you can just take a moment and give them a moment, and name the feeling and then kind of release it. And there'll be some thoughts that'll come into your mind of what to do next. So from this conversation, as you're breathing in and out, and you might be noticing the breath on the top of your lip at this moment, you might be noticing that you're sitting up tall and that you're pulling your back, your upper back toward the chair, but not pressing on it, and your tummy's pulled in. And then you're just noticing kind of the expansiveness of your breath as it moves in and out through your body. And what I was about to say was, these thoughts feel so good, and you're taking a moment when you need to identify your feelings, and then you're releasing them. And after our conversation today in this meditation, I'm hoping that you'll find something that's positive as far as something you can shift within yourself of how you might have been thinking about things. Or maybe there's something in our conversation about how Joel described his parents, or something about infinite possibilities that was a new piece of information, or that his number 2 rule was to trust your intuition, or really believing in your intuition, or if we're not trusting people right now, or if we're feeling afraid, how can we move into more allowing what that fear is trying to tell us? Maybe we need to take some measures to secure ourselves. But just notice those feelings and become present to something that you can do after we leave our conversation today. And then slowly bring yourself by squeezing into the present moment, by squeezing your feet and releasing them, and moving your hands up and down your thigh just to squeeze your knees, feel them alive, and roll your shoulders back. All right, and just move your hips around the chair a little bit, and then open your eyes and come back into the present moment. Joel, I want to thank you for doing this exercise with me. Was there anything that came into your perspective?
No, just meditation is such a powerful, powerful process. And it's actually chapter 8 in Mindful Money Management. And I talked about how it has gotten me to be so much more present and be aware of others, of nature, be more productive, And I highly recommend, if anyone's not doing it on a regular basis, to start.
Terrific. And what type of app do you use? Do you use guided meditations?
I do. I use an app called Calm, CALM.
Excellent. All right. And do you do it every day, or how often do you do it?
Every day, 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to another conversation with you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. You can hear the gems that are resonating here from what you've learned. And thanks, Mike Abea, sound engineer, videographer, photographer, Monfrere. He's my brother from another mother. And we'll see everybody next Monday. Do you want to build upon your leadership skills and become more effective as a business owner? Do you want to reinvent yourself or evolve as you redesign your business? This is a dual innovation process. Are you ready to take charge of who you next become? If the answer is yes, I've been developing and implementing mentoring programs to thousands of emerging to experienced entrepreneurial leaders and business owners and their teams since 1992. I totally love it and feel I'm on this planet to evolve the leadership in the world from the inside out. Of course, this means seeing myself as a work in progress, which is beneficial to you because I'm not stagnant and I'm motivated to create and bring you incredible programming all the time. So here's a few ways that you can get involved in our WeMentor Self-Leadership community. You can subscribe for free through WeMentor.com to the podcast. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, which used to be iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, Blueberry Directory, iHeartRadio, or TuneIn Radio, which is where you can shout out your request on smart home device through Alexa, Cortana, Amazon Echo, and Google Home. You can also become a sponsor of this program and support what's happening here in all these meaningful conversations. Or you can get one-on-one mentoring and go at your own pace as you evolve into the leader that you've always wanted to become. You can join a WeMentor mini lab, which we offer several times during the year. We're focused on some element of self-leadership and your progress toward becoming more effective. And the last and final way in which you can get involved in WeMentor's self-leadership community is by joining a 1-year entrepreneurial leadership and mentoring lab where we dig into the details and help you with the operational along with your leadership skills so you can evolve with your entity and really, really progress in building the life that you've always wanted to build. So please check out WeMentor.com. You can email me, Nancy at WeMentor.com, or call me 612-804-8920. All right, keep listening and we'll see you next week.